Welcome to Future Ready Live, where we talk about topics that will help CPAs, CGMAs, finance and accounting pros prepare for change and transformation. Today, we're going to be talking about what CPAs and CFOs need to know about blockchain and crypto. Joining me is Ron Quaranta. He's the founder and chairman of the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance, which aims to promote the adoption of distributed ledger technology across financial markets. You can find them on the web at www.wsba.co, on Twitter at Wall Street BTC, and Ron's handle is at Ron Qman, Qman. So he's a contributor to two books, Blockchain in Financial Markets and Beyond Challenges and Applications, and Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Regulation 2019. He frequently appears in media, including Bloomberg Radio, a past Accounting Today top 100 most influential person. And Ron, we're just excited to have you here. Say hi to everyone.
Tom, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I'm glad to see you and looking forward to our conversation.
I think, we've caught up. I think the first time we met was in San Francisco at the Digital CPA conference.
That sounds about right. And it's unbelievable how fast time has flown.
It really is crazy. But blockchain and crypto have been in our top 10 technologies for finance and accounting pros since we started the list in 2018. Most recently, it showed up as number 8 on the list in 2021. And you've been on the vanguard of this since the beginning that this thing all hit, and you formed this amazing working group and all kinds of stuff. So we're just excited to have you here. And let's start with just give the kind of basic definition of blockchain and crypto for those who might not even understand it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tom. And I always try to start with these fundamentals. So let's start with the basics of blockchain. Blockchain is essentially a transactional register. A register that records transactions and records them in blocks, and it leverages cryptography, which engages in secure communications, and peer-to-peer technology to enable that network of transactional registers. So that's a little bit of a mouthful, but it's a fancy way of saying it combines transactions into a record. Now, the interesting part about that is, and I know a lot of my colleagues in the accounting profession, a lot of colleagues that are CFOs, worry that they need to understand the technology. My argument is, they need to understand the use case. Now, from that point, Tom, everything becomes a bit more complicated. There are public blockchains like the Bitcoin blockchain that you and I have talked about in the past. There are private blockchains created by gigantic organizations like JP Morgan or IBM, for example. So, but starting at that fundamental level, it's a register of transactions. The derivative of that next step associated with blockchain, and I think one of the things, at least in this past year, you and I have seen the headlines that's really important for the accounting profession and the CFOs of the world is the concept or the challenges around crypto assets. Yeah. And essentially, crypto assets or digital assets are assets that are digital representations of value that live on blockchains. And once the profession and colleagues in the space have those two definitions, everything derives from that.
All right, that's a great primer for all of us out there. And so with these things coming out right now, let's talk about a couple things like I've been paying attention to this NFT thing, right? What the heck is that? Obviously, the IRS added it to the tax returns, I think last year or maybe the year before, but it's a mandatory crypto question that your folks are being asked about. I'm hearing like there's ATMs now that might do Bitcoin. So tell me about the big trends. Like, what's it mean from securities, tax reporting, and some of these other areas?
Yeah, there's a lot going on, Tom, and it's a really good point. Let's break some of that down a little bit. And I think in 2017, when you and I were chatting at Digital CPA, it was the height of the ICO boom, and everyone was doing an initial coin offering. And then the regulators came out and said, that kind of looks a little shady. You probably shouldn't be doing that. What's evolved over that 3 or 4 years really is a couple of things that I think are very, very important for the profession. One is the birth or emergence at scale of crypto assets broadly. Cryptocurrencies that people can buy at exchanges like Robinhood, potentially a future of ETFs, for example, that they'll be able to invest in. The other thing I will argue is that people and professionals across different industries are beginning to look at at blockchain technology as a new platform to create value. And what do I mean by that? So for example, you and I have talked about and seen supply chains leveraging blockchain for recording transactions, for example. During COVID, which is the human tragedy of COVID that we're all still working through, drug transactions and drug shipments, for example, being tracked in an immutable, secure way on blockchain. So the ability to manage data and transactions across multiple industries is beginning to really come to the fore, leveraging blockchain transactions. Over the past couple of years, we've seen these innovations accelerate. And I think Barry Melanson, it's a phrase I often steal from him, I think, which is the pace of innovation will never be as slow as it is today. And I love that phrase because it really does represent what we're talking about on a day-to-day basis. So there are now millions of Americans and many millions around the world that are trading crypto assets. And to your point, the Internal Revenue Service in the 1040 form, literally one of the first lines is, have you engaged in the sale or purchase or ownership of digital assets? I'm probably paraphrasing that poorly. We're beginning to see new instruments as well. So one of the questions I ask myself, and one of the things I advise my colleagues in the accounting profession, and Tom, as you know, I'm not an accountant. I just spend way too much time with accountants, and I married my accountant, which is always interesting. But things like NFTs, non-fungible tokens. We're looking at a world where people can buy digital assets or digital representations of assets that are unique, immutable, stored on a blockchain, and can't be transferred in pieces. In other words, can't be copied. Now, there's challenges there. There is, why is this non-fungible token worth $69 million? What does the IRS call this? Is it a collectible, and how much tax do I owe? How do we secure these things in wallets? So there's a lot there, Tom, and I would argue for the profession, it's really worth carving out a little bit of time just to keep up. It's moving that fast.
Yeah. So obviously, where would you suggest that they go? Obviously, some of it should be coming to you, but where would they go to learn a little bit more about this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And shameless self-plug for my organization, obviously the Wsba, the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance, we do quite a bit of work through our working groups and our members in legal and accounting. Certainly, our working group in accounting is probably one of our most dynamic, banking and trading. So we're happy to share that information with the marketplace. The other thing that I think is really interesting, one of the things I would suggest or efforts I would suggest is very important. AICPA and CPA.com have done a wonderful job for the profession, creating a series of courses on understanding crypto, understanding blockchain. I had the privilege of having my big head on a webcast many years ago that was recorded for CPA.com and AICPA around the fundamentals. And that's evolved quite a bit in the past few years. Supply chain, healthcare, taxation, certainly. So participants in the profession and CFOs should avail themselves of those resources. They're very valuable. Yeah.
And you're right. I think AICPA and CPA.com has taken a lead in this area. So I know there was they did a big write-up of the 2019 Blockchain Symposium report. It's available on the CPA.com website. But they also went into how many firms are beginning to get into crypto assets. They're thinking about changing up auditing, right? Those kind of things. Can you tell us a few things about what's changing the way things are done relative to blockchain and crypto in the accounting world or in the corporate world?
Yeah, that's a really important question, Tom, and I'm glad you raised it. It's interesting. I want to touch for a brief moment on the perception in the accounting profession. When you and I started chatting 2016, 2017, accountants knew about crypto. They understood about this change that's coming, but very few had dedicated innovations groups to blockchain or crypto. We are very privileged to have dozens of accounting practices that are now members of our accounting working group. All of them have blockchain or crypto practices in some way, shape, or form. And there are a couple of reasons for this. We touched on the taxation. Millions of people are transacting in cryptocurrencies and crypto assets, and they're going to those subject matter experts, their accounting professional, to understand, what do I do about this? Yeah. How do I report this? What are the tools I need to track transactions, to track valuation, for example? So it's good to see the accounting profession really being at the forefront of that, offering those practices, offering those tools. You and I have colleagues in the space that are vendor colleagues that have created and launched tools to help track, to help evaluate, to help report. And I think it's important to keep track of those as well and see how they expand over time. I think the other interesting thing from the accounting profession, I think from the perspective of chief financial officers, for example, is the fact that crypto assets are now much more widely being held by public companies.
Yeah.
Which now hits on, as you and I know, an entire series of how is this held on their books and records? How is it valued? What are the reporting requirements of this? And it kicks off that series of conversations that I think are very important, because the accounting profession will be one of the professions that really drives the evolution of crypto in this space.
Yeah.
What happens when Tom Corporation holds Bitcoin on its balance sheet to the tune of millions or billions of dollars, or Tom's 30,000 employees are all paid in crypto? How does that get reported? What are W-9s associated with crypto payments, for example? So those might sound like crazy questions, but those are the questions that can only be answered by the profession.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you take Elon Musk and Tesla, right? They kind of changed the whole game with all the both taking Bitcoin for cars and putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet at a historic level. So
that's right.
That really kind of got the whole world focused. And that's a sign, I guess, that this stuff is really, a lot of people probably were hoping it was going to go away in the early days. And I mean, are we getting close to the tipping point, do you think? What's your say on all that?
I think, so on the Tesla thing, just real quickly, Tom, I think that's important because you're absolutely right. They held crypto on their balance sheet. And I think it was yesterday or early this morning, I was listening to Bloomberg Radio, and they had done their public reporting. And they made more money selling Bitcoin off their balance sheet than they did from selling cars. And again, that's that series of conversations. What does it mean from a corporate treasury perspective to do that versus the reason this company exists is to sell cars, for example?
Yeah.
You know, as far as the question around the tipping point, I always suggest that blockchain and crypto have an uneven evolution. And what I mean by that is I think we're approaching a tipping point from the perspective of crypto assets and cryptocurrencies to be purchased at an institutional level. You know, my organization is the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance. So obviously we spend a lot of time with Wall Street firms, as well as accountants and lawyers, et cetera. All of them at an institutional level are trying to understand what the future holds, holding and investing on behalf of customers. Pardon me, Tom. On behalf of customers investing in crypto assets. I think the leveraging of blockchain technology across multiple industries is that silent evolution that you don't see in the news a lot because Bitcoin's at 60-something thousand. But I don't know a profession that's not looking to leverage blockchain in some way. Supply chain, healthcare, voting, digital media, you name it, really are looking at the innovation associated with blockchain as improving their industry.
Yeah, it's funny because I talked to a friend of mine who's a CTO at IBM up in Toronto.
Yep.
And he was talking about, some of the work they're doing, and one, supply chain, medicine, right, tracking drugs and those kind of things. And the other one was voting. And I think the country of Estonia is like using blockchain to change up their whole voting, which God knows we could probably use that in the U.S. after this last election.
Oh, we after the last election, Tom, I'm sure you had these conversations as well. We had dozens of colleagues reaching out saying, is someone going to fix this?
Yeah. Why can't we put this on the blockchain?
Exactly.
So,
one industry, Tom, just to add to that I think is really important for the profession to keep an eye on, believe it or not, is leveraging of blockchain in the global real estate industry.
Ooh.
And all of the impact of that from the perspective of immutable records, title, deeds, insurance. You and I, when you buy a house, when you sell a house, arguably probably the most painful experience we sometimes have in our adult lives. What happens when that industry evolves? And my wife can sell our house in a day. And I know that seems to be a bit far-fetched, but that's really where innovation is taking us.
Yeah. Well, with electronic documents, all those things, right, that all can be done on the blockchain, which then makes it much more secure. Well, and that segues to the other question that we always have is, there's this talk about the tech tsunami and that robots are taking over our profession. Is blockchain going to disrupt the work that we do today, or will this open new doors for other avenues for us to create value? Back to your real estate notion.
Right. Yeah, we that's a question that comes up, Tom, in every meeting with every professional group. And I remember the the conversations at Blockchain Symposium with the CPA and digitalcpa.com. What our argument is that blockchain and crypto assets don't make core functions for the accounting or audit professional go away. On the contrary, they force the evolution of those functions.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense when we look at the broad sweep of innovation over time. I come out of Wall Street, Tom, and we may have even had this conversation years ago. I used to have to sit there with piles of paper and a pencil and mark off trades for securities on the American Stock Exchange between from a giant paper ledger to these little tickets that were picked up off the floor. It's good that that goes away because it meant that market became more efficient. So my advice to the accounting professional and the audit professional is you don't want to be the professional that doesn't have an answer when you have a client come in and say, I own Bitcoin. I think I owe $1 million tax bill. What do I do?
Right.
Or my firm is now leveraging or participating in the IBM blockchain for healthcare or supply chain. What does this mean for corporate reporting? What does this mean for my balance sheet? So I would argue it really is an opportunity to enhance those consultative services, to be the thought leader that a lot of industry colleagues need, and to really offer that consultative kind of, again, that thought leadership to clients across different industries. I've had the privilege of working with a lot of accounting practices and with our colleagues at AICPA that focus on community banking, that focus on agriculture, that focus on healthcare, for example. This is an opportunity to really be at the forefront of how those industries of their clients evolve.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, you hit it right. The whole idea of evolution, that we've got to move up that value chain because now we can automate the things that, used to drive us crazy. So, so let's look at automation as augmenting our intelligence, not replacing it. And I think that's the key concept here.
Great. Right. I think one last thing to that, Tom, is the phrase I often use for my colleagues in different industries. The quantitative aspects of what they do, the very boring reconciliation stuff, technology will help evolve some of that away. The qualitative aspects that deliver true value to clients is what professionals need to focus on.
Yeah. Well, it's this idea of being able to advise your client, like how can you use crypto and blockchain to further your goals for your business or your wealth and your family, however it is, right? To be able to advise them on that notion. And it's better that the professionals bring it up before their client just goes and does things and then says, now what do I do? So it would be better to have those proactive conversations to say, hey, are you doing anything with blockchain or crypto? And at least get yourself ahead of those things so you're not suddenly kind of catching up, trying to figure out, oh God, what do I do with this?
Yep. You don't want to be caught in that position of, I don't know what to do, or even say to my client.
Yeah. And it's going to be the same for the CFO advising the CEO, right? It's better to be thinking about this, talking about it at the strategic leadership team to make sure you guys know how this might be impacting your business or your industry. To go back to the Tesla example. So
that's an important point, right? If you look at the CFO's role, for example, and I know some of this targets CFOs, what happens when the chief executive officer or the chief operating officer says, we're participating on a blockchain?
Right.
And there's a series of conversations that the CFO needs to be plugged into. What does that mean? We're holding cryptocurrency. Where and how?
Yeah.
How is that valued? And who's, we can get into really complex conversations, Tom, around custody of these assets. Who controls that?
Yeah.
Those are important questions that every CFO needs to be, at some point in the future, be able to answer.
Yeah. So again, lots of resources on CPA.com and the AICPA SEMA websites, as well as the Wall Street Blockchain Announced. We're now coming up on the end of our time here, Ron. So what's next for WSBA? What are you getting involved in, like in the next couple months?
Well, we have a lot going on, Tom, and thanks for asking. We've been adding new members across different industries, from banking to technology to accounting to law and beyond. We do a lot of events for our members across different working groups. We have an upcoming accounting event, believe it or not, that we're scheduling for after tax season. Essentially, hey, you survived crypto tax season, what now? Which we think is very, very important. So I would encourage colleagues to reach out if there's any questions we can help answer. Any events you want to participate in, let us know. we'd be happy to have you join us.
Awesome. Well, we'll be putting more about this, but I think the big takeaway here is it's the time is now to start educating yourself as a CPA or CFO or CGMA about what blockchain does, what kind of cryptos, and start paying attention if you haven't already, to get yourself up to speed. And to your point, Ron, they don't have to be experts in the technology, but they have to be experts in what the technology can do.
That's right.
I think that's the key concept here that I took away from our conversation. So you can visit wsba.com to get more information. I'll probably be at one of those upcoming blockchain alliances that you're putting on. At Wall Street BTC, if you want to get them on Twitter. And Ron is at Ron Qman and his handle. So keep in touch with. That's the best way to learn about it, is follow you and the blockchain and Wall Street blockchain analysis, blockchain.
It's
like a tongue twister on Twitter or obviously on LinkedIn. So thank you for being here with me, Ron, and I'll be back here on LinkedIn the first and third Tuesday of each month at noon Eastern, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.